talking with one of my oldest and best friends in the industry, Jim Bosiljevac. Jim, welcome back to the show.
Hey, man, it's always my pleasure. Good to see you.
If you've been listening since day one, you know Jim was actually my very first guest on the show. Back then, we dug into his work as an executive creative director at Yahoo. And now Jim's an assistant professor of advertising at UT Austin, University of Texas, Austin, hook 'em horns. And he just launched a course on Domestika. So actually, let's start there. Jim, talk to us about what Domestika is and how your course came about.
Yeah, okay. So this was, when during COVID, everybody was jumping all over the online courses and trying to figure out what to do with your time when you're sitting at home. And kind of the tail end of that, this company reached out to me, Domestika, and they are a global creative community of all these people who do cool, interesting things and create these Skillshare videos, these Skillshare courses. And a lot of their courses are like craft courses. So everything from like, how do you make puppets for stop motion animation to how do you design in Figma to like a lot of like hands-on, like, production work and stuff like that. And they said, we're trying to get a little bit more upstream, into business stuff. And would you be interested in doing one on creative advertising? And, the course content would be kind of up to you, but they have a format, and it's, it was pretty turnkey in terms of like actually creating the course. And so we spent a lot of time working on it, and went and recorded it, did a lot of like the development of the course on paper, flew and recorded some stuff in studio, and then came home and was recording like voiceover and all kinds of things in my closet at home. And then they've put it together, and it's coming out.
Has it come out already? Is it available now, or is there a launch date?
Yeah, it's live. Yeah, it's live. I'll send you the link. Maybe we could post it. It's called, it has a really catchy title. It is called Developing Creative Advertising from Brief to Pitch, which really describes kind of exactly what it is. All the way from, I actually start earlier than that because, when I teach and anybody who's done like spec work, right, you kind of start with the product and you're not handed a brief like you would be at an agency. And so I start with the product and then go all the way through the writing of the brief, coming up with ideas, you know, getting stuck, coming up with more ideas. How do you shape those into campaigns and platforms, and then putting it all together into a deck? And it's live now, and so you can check it out. You can take the course if you want.
Cool. We'll make sure we get the link and everything up. But yeah, I'm looking at your table of contents right now, and like you've got a video on how to get unstuck, and you've got one on fine tuning and common traps and finding the big idea part one, finding the big idea part two. So like, who did you have in mind when you designed this course, especially as you think about creatives who might end up in-house? Is there uh, anyone that you had in mind as you're developing this?
Yeah, I mean, I really had in mind people who are probably more junior, and just trying. One of the things I kind of realize, and we've talked about this over the years, is when we start off as creatives, you're just trying to figure out like how do I do things and what's good, and you're kind of just you know shooting in the dark, and you're like just coming up with ideas, and then eventually you kind of develop a process, whether you think about it or know it or not. You develop a process, and then you kind of become almost unaware of your process, right? Like you just internalize it so much that you just kind of do it. And so if you ask somebody who's like been doing it for 25 years, like, what's your process like? So a lot of times they'll go, huh, what is my process like? They might know the starting point or whatever, but like it's, we've been doing it for a long time. So you kind of internalize it. So I wanted this to be for people who were kind of at the beginning of their journeys. So they could be students, they could be junior creatives, they could be just thinking about getting into the industry or trying to put together some spec work on their own and seeing if they like it as a process or as a thing to attempt to do. And basically say, here's how you do it. This is actually what I'm saying is here's how I do it, because
Yeah.
your process is going to be different. But just like seeing somebody actually do the work and what it like literally looks like, um, It's funny. I was teaching my I've got two daughters, and I was teaching them earlier earlier today how to clean the bathroom because we kept saying, "Go clean the bathroom," and then they'd be like, "It's cleaned," and we'd go in and be like, "This is not clean," and it kind of realized same thing I realized in class sometimes. It's like you got to get in and be like, "This is what scrubbing looks like." You hold the brush and you really dig in and you spray. You had to actually like show them this is how literally how you do it, and we take that for granted sometimes. So I wanted the
Yeah,
course to kind of be like this is literally how I do it. I take a black Sharpie marker and I take some of these yellow sticky notes and I start writing down ideas, and this is what they look like. Like they're not sexy. They're most of them are bad, right? And even I've been doing this for 25 years, like you, and like most of our ideas are still crap. Like it's fine. That's just how the process works. And just
yeah.
saying this is how unsexy this stuff is, and so the course is a lot of that, just all the way from the beginning into where I'd walk into a creative director and say, here are my three campaign ideas or whatever.
Do you think some of that is just getting over the fear of coming up with something great? So I remember, so you and I both went to portfolio school at VCU Brand Center. And I feel like, my first semester there for sure, but probably my first, my 2 years there, it would take me a whole week to come up with a bunch of, I don't know, out of home headlines or, print headlines. Where now I feel like I'm not going to always knock it out of the park, but I can at least get to that level. I mean, I could write that kind of stuff in a half hour. And part of that is I just know I can. It's not like, well, I have to write like 12 versions of the same line. Like how much of coming up with a big idea is just getting over the fear of like writing something stupid?
Yeah, I think some of it's probably the fear of that, right? And if you're in, especially if you're a junior and you're in a room and sharing ideas that you suspect might be stupid with other people, like that's tough. And even with yourself, like the whole like skeet shooting that happens, if you're in a brainstorm, which are terrible, and you get the skeet shooter in the room where anytime somebody throws out an idea, they're the first one to tell you why it's the wrong idea.
Yeah.
But we do that with ourselves as well, and that's why, like, in this course, I start off with kind of emphasizing the creative process and being like, you got to be in a certain mode at different stages, whether you're working with yourself or you're working with a team. It's really important with a team because you all end up wanting to strangle each other, but you can really shut yourself down too. If you're like, you write down an idea and you're like, I don't know if that's good or not. Like stop trying to write good ideas. Like that's not what you're trying to do at this stage. You're just trying to write ideas. And then you come
Yeah.
back and you're like, now are these good based on my brief, based on what we're trying to do with this campaign, whatever it is. So I think there's like both the fear, the emotional element of it, but then also just like it's a very kind of a processy thing of just like we're not there yet. You're not at step two. You are literally step one, which is the goal of step one is fill the wall with ideas, quantity. Like don't worry about quality. And so I think that's part of it. And then I think also it's just for like what you were saying, like you sit down and do it a little bit quicker. It's just muscle memory too. Like you just build those like neural pathways or whatever. Like this will make a
Yeah.
good headline. I recognize that's an insight. Recognize there's a thought. Recognize why that sentence is would work better if I flipped it. Like just kind of understanding the mechanics of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Talking about your course that you developed, was there anything that you tried to do differently in your course compared to other creative courses out there? Because there are a ton out there, and some are really, really great, and some of them are like, I guess. But how did was there anything you tried to do to differentiate yours?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest differentiator, and to your point, like there are so many good courses. Like I think Bagley's course is amazing. Dan Nelken's got an amazing course. Shlomo Genshin has a great course. Like there are just a ton of really good courses, and even when I take those, or when I, I'm just like going through, like I've got Dan Nelken's book I'm using in one of my classes. They like you're they're a peer, and but I look at them and I'm like, oh, I never thought of it that way, or I've never thought of articulating it that way. And I think when
Mhm.
you see somebody else do it a different way, it just is like, oh, here's another little tool in my toolbox. I could know a bunch of that stuff, but that one I didn't know, so I'm gonna borrow that one as well. But to answer your question, what I was trying to do differently with this is really make it go end to end. So there are no gaps. And I had realized even when I was putting this stuff together, I had a few gaps. Like even when I teach my classes, like there were a couple places where I was like, okay, now y'all go figure it out, because those classes are so much about they put work on the wall and I give them feedback and they go off and do it. Like we did, you just put a bunch of work on the
Yeah.
wall and somebody would come and be like, there's nothing in any of this except for this idea. Go that way. And you're like, okay, cool. I guess I'll do that. But when you're not getting that constant feedback, it's like, well, you got to do every little step. So even the thing where I'm like, here's a wall full of ideas. Now I literally will move things around and I'm going to name the areas. Like they might not be a real name. It's not consumer facing or anything, but I'm just going to name this area of stuff. Like I didn't really ever teach that before.
Hmm.
So I wanted to make sure there were no gaps in the process. And the other thing was like, it's not pretty. Like I'm not sharing like, here's how you make the finished ad. That wasn't the point of this course. The point of this course was like, how do you get to the thing that you could then go take and finish or pitch to a director or a client?
Yeah. I'm wondering, is your course, is it more of a one-way course or is it like a workshop style environment? And I mean, do you see the difference between doing one or the other? Is one more helpful, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. Like, I think the nice thing with domestic is when you sign up for these courses, there is a community. Like, there are assignments baked in. So if you go through and each section has an assignment, like, okay, now you pick a product. Now you go through and write the brief. You can share them on the forum. So I'll comment on them, or other students can comment on them. So there's a nice little community that can build where you do get that two-way interaction.
Mhm.
um, but it's different than like if I were in one of my portfolio courses where I'm seeing everything. Like I'm seeing and they're getting feedback on all of the work. So they put 100 ideas up on the wall and we're going through and being like, this group over here, like it's not that granular. So it's kind of in the middle. It's not just a one-way thing where you're sitting there watching it. You do get to upload, you get interaction with the community, you get interaction with me, but um, not that granular.
Yeah. Um, I wanna ask you some questions about teaching at UT Austin. Before I do though, with Domestica, I've seen some of your promos on, I don't know if it's been on Instagram or on LinkedIn, but where you had, I'm guessing you had AI create whatever was under your ball cap. Was that you, or did they do that, or how did that thing come? How did your promos come
I did
about?
that one. I did that one. Yeah, I did that one. Like they gave you tools and they give you a toolkit to promote the course. So here's a bunch
Mhm.
of guidance on how do you promote it. And then here's like B-roll we shot. They had a photographer on set and stuff like that. And they cut together some promos in different languages and stuff. And so I took one of those collections of B-roll and I cut together that thing with AI that where my hat comes off and there's like gears and there's actually a little mouse in there that it's hard to see.
No, I saw it.
That
I
was me.
was like, "Oh, that's kinda cool." Uh, I wanna talk about you teaching. So you're also, so you've got the Domestica course out. You're also teaching this semester.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through, like, what you're teaching and who your students are? Like, where do they come from? Like, what's a portfolio class like at UT Austin?
Yeah, so I'm teaching in the Texas Creative Sequence, which is a portfolio sequence. It's 4 classes. These are juniors and seniors, and they're all advertising creative students. And so this semester we have four portfolio: one, two, three, and four are the 4 semesters, and then there's a copywriting and an art direction seminar when they take portfolio two. So this semester I'm teaching portfolio one, which is obviously their first class coming in. So these are people who were accepted to the program, first experience with it. And I'm teaching portfolio three, which is those are seniors. They'll be graduating in the spring, and they are really focusing more on, I got to get my portfolio in shape. I got to be doing the best work, and their eyes are starting to look at like, how am I going to get a job? What's the work that's going to get me a job? And so it's a very different kind of mindset for both of those classes, although it might look the same from the outside. From the outside, I always start my classes, like I do in the Domestica course, with what's the idea. Let's dig into the strategy. Let's dig into like what are the business problems you're trying to solve for. Where are you going to find your insights? Because they have to write those strategies themselves. you and I have both worked at agencies where like you're handed the strategy and that's it. But I think understanding that and being a decent strategist or ideally a great strategist as a creative is always beneficial.
Yeah.
And so we make them do that and make sure that what they're saying something that is insightful before they get into the execution of it. But then it is a lot of like sticky notes on the walls and just kind of the workshops and critiques. And so we'll do any of those courses over a semester. They'll do 3 or 4 projects, and we look at it a lot. I think they're always, especially in portfolio one, they're surprised by the volume, the amount of work they have to come up with, whether
Yeah.
it's 100 thumbnails or we're going to review this thing 4 or 5 rounds, and they're like, "Geez, I'm out of ideas." And like, "No, you're not. You got more
Yeah.
in there. Like, let's find it."
I remember our first
Yeah, go.
portfolio class. It was our copywriting professor Kazkatsius had us come in with like 20 ideas on something, and I mean I just remember staying up all night coming up with however many ideas, and then staying up all night the next night, and then we went in and he killed everything, and at the time it was crushing, but it was like we looking back, it was like, yeah, we didn't have anything good, but then having him say 2 days from now you got to come in with another 20 was just like it just some Herculean task. I didn't know how any of us were going to do it. So like, you know, it it's interesting hearing you talk about the volume of that. What is it like working with those beginners who are just figuring out how to do this?
I mean, it forces you into what we were talking about earlier, which is that process of it's not about good right now. Like, don't worry about good. Like, just worry about quantity. I had a similar experience when we were at VCU. Jerry Torsha told me write 1,000 headlines for Lionel Trains between Thursday and Tuesday. And it was like, I can't, but in that process, I learned, I'm like, I can't worry about if this line is good. I just need to write it and move on, or otherwise it's not going to happen. And so the headline assignment or the 100 thumbnails assignment that we give the students here is the same thing. Like, it's just like, basically break that mindset of I need to do good stuff to put on the wall and be like, no, you need to put stuff on the wall. And then we're going to develop your taste by looking at it and deciding, like, is there an insight here, or is that just a line that's written, some funny joke, right? 'Cause the other thing
Mhm.
that happens a lot of times, especially when they come in, is you're like, okay, put up 100 ideas on the wall, and everything sounds like advertising. And it's like, no, stop
Yeah.
writing advertising. Like, just write things that are true and that you would respond to. Like, make it come from you. Don't make it come like you saw an ad and now you're trying to mimic that. And that happens a lot. So there's just a couple things that you just have to get them in the right mindset for. But usually by the end of portfolio one, they've got that down. They're like, cool, I'm gonna, and then you get into that thing. I don't know if you've seen that Ira Glass quote around like
The
when
gap.
you're early on, like you have taste, like you look at, you're like, I know that's what I want to do, that level of stuff. And I look at the stuff I'm doing and there's a huge gap. And there's this frustration, like, how do I get to that? And
Yeah.
that's a lifelong process, really.
Yeah. Yeah. What so you're teaching portfolio 1, like what changes then to portfolio 2 and portfolio 3 when students are thinking more seriously about like by that time hopefully they have objects that they're putting in their portfolios. They're like, this campaign is going to get in my portfolio because it's going to get me a job. Like that's kind of the mindset at that point. Like, what are the changes that you're seeing as they progress? If any students are listening, like what makes them successful? Like what makes a successful portfolio 3 student?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the portfolio one, once I do much more lecturing and that one around things like breaking down ads, and it's really about understanding how it's supposed to work and then trying it on your own, right? And so once you kind of have that understanding, then portfolio two, portfolio three is really about like, okay, how do you build out your toolbox? How do you find your own voice? How do you find this thing that works for you and makes you unique? And that's one thing that I always say in class, and it's kind of like a little bit of an eye rolly kind of thing. It's like your voice is the thing that separates you. And it's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. right? Like it sounds like a Hallmark card or something, but
Yeah.
it's true, right? Like we know people who we went to school with who they're just like weird and like everything they wrote, you're like, I never would have been able to come up with that. They're just it's just coming out of their brain because their brain is wired differently. And so
Yeah.
you got to figure out like how can you solve this problem that you're trying to solve, this business problem or this strategic problem, but do it in a way that is unique to you because your portfolio needs to stand out amongst all the other hundreds of portfolios that recruiters are looking at. And so, I think that's a really hard thing to do because it's like everything you don't want it to be, one single tone. You want it to be appropriate to the product or category, but you also it needs to be unique. And so finding that balance is really hard. I think that's a lot of kind of portfolio 2 and portfolio 3 is like getting the groove, getting the momentum, be like, okay, so who am I as a creative? What is my process? What is my voice? What is the kind of work that I aspire to? And then when you get toward that last year, it's like, now how do I fill my portfolio with stuff that I really show this is what I'm capable of, and stuff that's going to have the stopping power that we're all going for in our ads. And somebody's gonna be looking through and be like, that's interesting. Let me take a look at who this person and what they can do.
Yeah. Now, this is gonna date us, but we're oldish, so whatever, but the portfolios that you and I graduated with, I don't know if they'd get us a job in today's market. I mean, maybe because I would say that probably 90% of my portfolio that I graduated with was double page magazine spreads. And that's, what I wanted to do because that's what I saw in communication arts. That's what I saw in the one show. That's why I wanted to get into the industry. And I still think that a really great headline and a really great visual or, a visual solution, like the kind of work you and I did as students, I think is still a really good litmus test for can you think conceptually? Can you write effectively? Can you art direct, crisply? But you and I didn't have any social anything. I don't even think we had any online things in our portfolio. So, like, what does a good student portfolio look like today?
Yeah, I think it has to. I mean, we still start in portfolio one. We start with like print like objects, right? To your point, like just it's the best way to look at things and kind of understand is there a concept here, and I don't want to have to read through a whole. We just don't have time to write a whole script and read through a script to do that,
Mhm.
right? So, but once they get toward the graduation and developing their portfolio further on, like they need to have this mindset of like they're not just creatives, but they're creators too.
Mm.
Ronnie Northrop passed that on. I can't remember who said it originally, but he was like, that was his insight with the students. And I think it's true. He was like, he's like, they can't just be idea people. They have to be idea people and executors. And it's interesting because you're kind of asking them, or we are asking them to go two different directions from where you and were, which is we were like all about the concept. And we're like, here's the concept, here it is on paper. And you would produce that in an agency with like real people who could produce it.
Now go get
These
Joe
students
Pitt
need to
coulda
be
do
able to
it and
go
it'll be
down and they
fine.
need. Yeah, exactly, right? And so what we're asking the students to do is like, no, you go make it. You actually have to go make it. Like we had like my portfolio 3 class last semester, we had we won a couple things at one show the students did, and those case studies are as good as any agency case studies. I mean, some of the stuff that they shot was, we work with the RTF for the radio, television, film department on some things, and like I was in I was on one of the productions. It's like a legit production. And so they are producing stuff, they're making stuff. But then we're also asking them to go up and like think about the business problems. The two that they got one show pencils from, they were like product ideas for Duolingo. Like they were not ads. Like there were ad campaigns that went around it, but they were product ideas. They were like solving a business problem and really thinking about consumer insight and a contextual insight. And so I think that showing off that thinking in a student book and then also making it just feel like relevant to the kind of ads that are that people react to. And it's not always ads, right? Like it's social content. It's having students like last year, the student did a campaign that was for like a whole social media platform. They just wrote all the posts, like, like 25 posts that would come from this character that they made up. And you could look at that and be like, that could go today. Like if we bought that idea I can see how that would just go and live in today's modern world, not just be like an ad in a magazine or whatever, like when you and I came out.
Yeah. Um, so when they're putting their portfolios together and they're going out and getting jobs, because we talk a lot on this podcast about in-house, I end up talking to people
Yeah.
generally who came from traditional agency backgrounds and are now leading great creative teams in-house. What are the students, based on your opinion, recent graduates, like what is their opinion or attitude towards in-house? Do they want to go in-house, or do they just want to get a job anywhere they can go, or like what are your observations?
They a lot of time they're open. I think they're much more open than we were. In fact, I remember coming out of school and I felt like if I didn't get a job at White and Fallon or Goodby, like I kind of failed. Like it wasn't,
Yeah,
it's just I
yeah,
wasn't a top tier, the top tier. Like those were the three. Um, these days, like they're much more, I think, open to what and interested in some of the things like whether it's an in-house team or going working on some social media for like a nonprofit or content creation or like I've had students even ask me about like how do I get it somewhere that is more of like also does like product development stuff like so they're interested in creative broadly. um we talk about that the agency versus in-house a fair amount. That's one of their questions, like what's the best place to start. And I mean, you and I were talking about this before we started recording about like, well, the agency is probably going to give you more variety, but there are certainly so many good in-house teams, and you hear the people that you interview. I'm like, man, I would love to work on some of those teams. They sound amazing. And so, what the advice I give to the students is, regardless of in-house or agency, like go where you can grow. Like that's the thing. You want to look at the people who are there. You want to have an understanding of like, am I going to be able to be around people that I can learn from? Am I going to have opportunities to do work, to experiment? Jason or Jamie talked about that on one of your earlier podcasts at Vans, like that freedom to experiment. Like that is a way that you really can learn and grow. And if you have a culture, whether it's in house or at an agency, where they allow that and they promote it, like that's golden. And then also
yeah,
like who would you be working for? I think that's a big thing. Like we know it's not just the name on the door. It's like who is the creative director you'd be working under, and
yeah.
there are some people who are kind of buried in some organizations who are great people to learn from and will give you opportunity and really help build you up. And so um, that to me is the biggest thing they should be considering, whether or not it's in house or at an agency.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Jamie Riley that I was just on the last episode, and I don't know if this is fair or not, but, like, if you were to tell a student, "Okay, do you wanna take an in-house job at Atlassian?" They might not really even know what Atlassian is, and they might be like, "Well, no, I wanna go to Wyden." But if you s or they might say, like, Chiat Day or 72 and Sunny. Then you said, "Okay, well, what if you wanna would you go work for Jamie Riley, who's been at, 72 and Sunny and Chiat?" And they'd say, "Absolutely." And so, yeah, I do think that it's you kind of with the bifurcation of in-house traditional agency and, really great people going to different places, it is almost like I think you have to look at the culture, but you do have to look at, who would I be working for and learning from. So, yeah, it's good advice.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things yeah, I think one of the things that your this podcast even does so well is just exposing people to, because I think in-house agencies don't always get they're not celebrated. You don't hear about them as much. Like you're hearing about them more and more these days, obviously, but like you don't hear about them as much. Like the podcast episode that you did with the I can't remember who their name was from NASA. I was like, I would love to work
Yeah,
at NASA. Like, but for students or like they're not thinking about that. They're not like there's a bazillion companies out there that you could work for, in different ways and apply your creative problem solving is a skill that can be applied a lot of different places. And so just
yeah,
kind of opening their heads to that opportunity, I think is great. Like I recommend this podcast all the time because I'm like, just listen to the way some of these leaders talk about how they run their in-house teams. And even if you're like, I would love to work for that person, I'd love to work for Jamie, maybe Jamie doesn't have an opportunity right now, but I want to find somebody who has that kind of, that ethos, or that they run their team that way. That's what I'm looking for. And then you can kind of get a sense of like, what kind of place do you want to work at? And your answer can be more nuanced than, agency or in-house. It can be more, I want to work at a place that's, celebrates experimentation, or whatever it is, tech forward and cutting edge of AI, or what, so you can have like some kind of like requirements or a dream job that you can kind of articulate.
Yeah. Now, I want to I want to ask another question about you teaching. I think you teach a class called Creativity in American Culture. Is that right? And I want to hear you explain a little bit about what that class is.
Okay. I am incredibly excited about this class. It's my first time teaching it. Um, it is so what I'm trying to do with this class is basically say there's all this great work in the world, right? There's stuff that is like high culture, low culture, mid culture, and all kinds of different media formats. We're going to look at some of our favorite things as a class. So I'm going to give some things that I'm into, and the students are going to pick a lot, and they're going to teach each other. So it's going to be a lot. They don't know this yet, but they will know it by the time this podcast comes out. But they are going to be doing a lot of the teaching in this class, and I'm going to give them some of the creative principles that make something creatively interesting or can lead to a great creative idea, but then they're going to be responsible for going out in the world and finding an application of it, or taking a music video or a film or a song, or whatever it is that they love, and kind of break it down creatively and say, here's what I see at work here. I see a mixing of two genres. I see a subversion of narrative expectations. I see a rebellion against cultural norms, or what, like some of these big kind of cultural ideas, or things that we can use creatively to come up with ideas. And I want them to take their things apart that they love and say, what's inside? Why does this work? What decisions were made by the creators? And then teach that back and forth to each other. Because even if you're not into, you know, I don't know what it would be, like you're not into modern interpretive dance, when I hear somebody who's passionate about it describe what's happening there and why it's good and what creatively is happening on stage or wherever it is, I'm like, oh, that's cool. I can learn from that thing that I've never given any thought to, and never thought about, but because they're passionate about it, they're going to be kind of delivering that message back and forth. So
That's very cool. What are talk to me about, like, you talk about you've got principles of American culture, creativity in American culture. Like, give me an example of some principles.
So I'm grouping these into a few kind of big buckets. So one of them I'm calling mix. And mix is you just take two things that would not normally go together and you mix them together. Okay. And so this is obviously, it's something that can create comedy, it can create horror, it can create all kinds of things. But or it could create a new something. Like if you like, I'm going to take sci-fi and western, I'm gonna mix those together and you get Star Wars or something like that. Or I'm
Yeah,
going to take an somebody from the past, and I'm going to put them in the present, and you get Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Kind of dated example, but you know what I mean. Or you
yeah,
take I'm going to take um, a disco song, and I'm going to mix it with a country song. Like that's all that mashups are, right? Just taking these things and putting together. So that whole
yeah.
topic is called mix. Like how can we juxtapose these things that we wouldn't think go together and come up with something new? Tons of examples of that. Another theme I'm calling, and this is kind of a bucket of themes, is calling against. So where is everybody going? What are they telling you have to do, and how do you go against that?
Hmm.
Whether it's the cultural revolution of the 60s was a huge, cultural upheaval that led to all kinds of interesting creative art. Look at a Bob Dylan song or a Woody Guthrie song, or NWA, like, right, like regardless of where we are in time, or high low culture, whatever, like somebody's got something to say about the way things are and why they shouldn't be that way. And or even like rebelling against your parental, with your parents, right? Like we've all experienced that, right? You hit a certain age and you're like, okay, Breakfast Club. Ferris Bueller. Like you're going against the rules that somebody else has set for you. And so that's like a big theme of like just against like what's everybody else doing or what am I supposed to do? And I'm going to do the exact opposite.
Yeah. You mentioned mix. This is something that just comes to mind because it's one of my favorite examples from the last few years. Do you know the Broadway show Hadestown? It won the Tony for
I've heard
best
it.
musical a
Yeah, I've
few
heard
years
of it.
ago.
Yeah.
I went and saw it with my son in New York, oh, probably like 4 years ago, and then it went on tour, and so then we went and saw it on tour. And essentially, it's the Greek story of, Orpheus, who, he falls in love and his lover goes down to hell, either gets tricked down to hell or gets bit by a snake, whatever version you read, and he has to go down and get her and bring her back. So it's a Greek tragedy, but it's set against a New Orleans backdrop, and the music is just a lot of trombone in the music and guitar, and the band is on stage. They're not down in the orchestra pit. It's like the band is on stage as the action is going in. But the idea of just taking Greek tragedy and New Orleans jazz and mixing them together just seems like, how is that going to work? It's like, I mean, whoever came up with, buffalo wings and said, we're going to deep fry these chicken wings, but then we're going to dip them in ranch. I think like it didn't sound good at first, but man, it's awesome. So
Yeah.
mix is a
And I
mix
think
is
that
pretty
once
cool.
you I'm hoping with this class that they're gonna, once you kind of point these things out, they can start to look around and say, "Oh, that's how that works. Oh, that's why that works. That's why that's funny, right? Because we have this, you know, we it's a ninja, but the ninja is like this big fat guy who's like not very mobile, right? Like that's funny because it's not what
It's a
you would
panda.
expect. Like that is a juxtaposition of right. It's a panda. The ninja's a panda, right? Or kung fu guy's a panda. I think that once you do that and you kind of understand how these things work and you've seen them in the world, then because not all these students in this class are creatives themselves, they're not all creative makers. But if you
Mhm.
are, you can start to take those concepts and apply them somewhere else. So, like the gerbil or the hamster campaign from Kia, right? Like, you could see that one. I don't know how they came up with that idea, but you could see that idea of like, okay, we've got these kids and they're riding around in a car and they're having a good time and we're playing some cool music and somebody saying that's not very interesting. What if instead of kids, we made them hamsters? And you're like, okay, brilliant campaign now. It's not that hard, but you need to be able to look at it and be like, what can we just tweak to make it, something interesting and novel?
Quick shout out. Was that Steve Yee did that? Wasn't Steve the executive creative director at David and Goliath when those hamsters came out? I'm just trying to give a shout out to Steve because he's our friend and we love him.
Yeah, I don't know. We do love Steve. I don't know if his credit is on that. Might be. It's very
Huh.
much like him. Yeah.
Um, one of the other things that was not around when we were in advertising, or sorry, in portfolio school, is AI. And I'm wondering if you are seeing
Yeah.
how is AI, I'm sure they're not escaping it. How is that transforming the role of junior creatives or hopefully soon to be junior creatives or even students in advertising?
Yeah, I mean, I think students with AI is an interesting topic alone that's kind of upending in a lot of ways, kind of traditional education and the way we test how people know things. In the portfolio classes, so portfolio one, my rule and our rule kind of collectively is no AI until you learn how to do this stuff. An analogy might be like you learn how to do long division and then you can use a calculator just so you understand the principles, you understand the process, you understand how to come up with a concept. And then later we start to introduce it more and especially, portfolio 3, portfolio 4, it's like you need to know how to use these tools. You need to know how to integrate them into your process. You and I'm sure use it a lot when we're concepting. Like I'll come up with questions prompt it, it will spit back stuff. And I'm basically creative directing it at that point. I'll be like, that's
Mhm.
interesting. How about more of these? Right. And so you're still doing the same process. And so once the students learn that process, I'm generally like, now accelerate that process. Now go bigger with it. You still need to be able to look at the 100 lines that you just had ChatGPT write and go, this one is an interesting thought. Let me take that and write it into a headline.
Mhm.
Um, but they're coming into a world, especially these students that are here now are coming into a world where they're going to be expected to be able to use these tools. Who knows what it's going to look like in the next 5 years, but like we were talking about earlier, like they need to come out and go, my role at this agency or wherever I work cannot just be I write 1,000 headlines because ChatGPT can do that. I need to
Yeah.
be, what would traditionally have been like an almost ACD role, right?
Yeah.
I need to understand the business context. I need to understand the strategy. Need to understand why this works for this consumer. I need to understand what insight is. And also I need to be able to work with whatever tools I have to generate a bunch of ideas and kind of, bring the best ones to the table. I also need to have taste. Like that's the other thing is like I didn't so it's there's a lot more being asked of students than when you and I came out. Where I think my experience at least was I'd go into an agency and they'd be like, just come up with a bunch of ideas and the creative directors would tell you which ones were good or not. Like that's what AI can do. And
Yeah.
and so I think figuring out how to work with that right now it's a big, it's obviously a big transformational moment for everybody.
Yeah. I remember the art directors that we went to school with, the first semester, Jelly Helm was their instructor. And I remember Jelly had them all kerning and doing leading by hand, you know, and no one does that anymore.
Yeah.
No one, it's just, there's no reason to do that because, I mean, back then it was Quark, but, now you've just got the whole Adobe Creative Suite and you can kern and you can do all the leading and it's just easy. But because Jelly had them doing it by hand, they knew the importance of it and knew how, just how a fraction of a millimeter made a difference. And I think about that a lot when I think about copywriters or any creatives coming up with headlines. Like, I mean, I'm afraid that if AI would have been around when I was a student and Cause just killed 20 of my concepts, I would have been like, oh, ChatGPT, write me 20 more ideas because I don't want to get yelled at again. And I'm sure the temptation is there, but what's missing is the discernment. Like as a student coming in, like I really have no idea of what's a good. It goes back to your Ira Glass, the gap thing. Like you just don't. It's hard to make the thing when there's a gap and you haven't put in the time to understand the craft. It just becomes. I mean, AI can really it could really slow you down because if you're just accepting what it takes and using it as the discernment, you're gonna be you're gonna be lost.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing where I think that there's still a lot of people who kind of feel like it's kind of cheating to use AI. And I don't think I wouldn't say that, but I do think that you can easily kind of cheat yourself, and it's especially dangerous when you're learning how to do it. Like, I think there are probably a lot of writers who write and just like it comes out and they instinctively write it a certain way and write it well. But a fewer subset who can look at a sentence and tell you why this sentence is better than that sentence, like what structurally is happening, or look at a sentence and say, this would be better if you took off these two words and moved them up because then the emphasis lands on this word and that's what you want to land. Like that's the same thing that you were saying with the the typography and the kerning, like to know what this little serif does or to know, like that's the real craft. And if you don't learn that, if you just kind of do the assignment, whether it's portfolio one or whatever it is that you're learning and you just do the assignment and everything's automatic and you're like, oh, I don't know how this works. I push the button and it comes out, like you're cheating yourself. I mean, that's the
Yeah,
bottom line. That sounds like a very old fuddy duddy thing to say, but it's the truth. Like you will end up in a world where you're like, all you know how to do is prompt, and you don't actually know how to do any of the stuff or even assess what comes out, or something might come out and you say, that's a cool idea. Let me tweak that line. And now it's actually a better headline. Like you have to be
Mhm.
able to do that.
Yeah. Jim, for as long as we've been friends, I think you've always been really good at understanding like the culture of an organization, whether it's an agency, whether it's a school, whether it's a group of students. I think that you've probably built a good culture when you were at DDB. I think when you were ECD at Yahoo, you did. You're a teacher now. You're a professor. You've also got this domestica class. Talk to me a little bit about creating a culture where people can learn and grow, and like what are the ingredients that you need for a successful culture?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that for me, one of the things, my whole career, and you were the one that kind of like turned me on to teaching a long time ago at Chicago Portfolio School. And so I've been doing it kind of on the side my whole career, but had one foot in both worlds. And what I kind of found was like I learned like there were things that I had in the professional world that I could bring into the classroom, like just ways of operating and stuff. And then there are also things that were in the classroom that were incredibly valuable for the professional world. And just like the what happens in a classroom, like everybody's there to learn, right? And you're sharing ideas, and it's about experimentation. There's expectation that there's going to be, a lot of failure, and it's a very open environment when it works well. And I think a lot of times in the corporate world, we're all about like getting the job done. But as you think about like how do you build both, a team that like really knows and likes to work with each other, and it feels connected, and also how do you like retain people, building a culture where people are constantly learning and sharing ideas with each other, and teaching each other, it can be really valuable. Like just from goes back to what I said earlier, go somewhere where you can grow. If you're at a place and you feel like you go in every day and you leave having learned something that you didn't know that morning when you walked in, like that's a huge, attractive thing for being at a place. And I would say that is more important, and it feels more important even than like what your salary happens to be or something like that. And so being able, like when I was at DDB, and then I did it at Yahoo too, like I started this thing where it was called And Also I Love, and it would just be somebody in one of our team meetings would just do a 5 to 10 minute presentation on something that they love, like something they're into that's not work, like something that's outside of work. And so we had people do like glass blowing, or like one guy did like fly fishing.
Hmm.
How do you not just fly fishing, but how do you tie a fly fishing? And he walked through the whole process. And we're all, I mean, creative people are just super curious. So nobody's going fly fishing anytime soon, but we're all like leaning in and like like just fascinated by this because he was passionate about it, and we're just learning something new. But you can do that also, just like we had we called them learning pods, but like one team would be like, we're going to do a thing on production, or somebody knew Blender really well, so he was like, I'm going to do some classes on Blender if anybody wants to come to those. And so just lunchtime, like 6 or 7 of us would show up, and you see like the expertise of somebody. You got a bunch of people that are learning new skills, and you're just kind of creating these bonds that are really interesting. And like I said, like just it's a retention tool too. Like people are like, I'm gonna stay here because feel like I keep getting better at what I'm doing. And I think that like especially nowadays, like with budgets and things like agencies, like they're not like when I started at Burnett, like there was an associates program, and you spent 2 years rotating through the agency with the intention of like training and learning
Hmm.
everything. There are very few places that you can do that these days. And so I think however you build that into your culture, your team culture, or your company culture, is really important. And it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be like we're bringing in like a speaker and we're going to pay him a bunch of money. It could just be like, look, Cliff knows how to do this stuff and he's really good at it. He could teach the rest of us how to do this, just by him talking about it.
This to me sounds exactly like what you're doing with your creativity in American culture class. Like you're getting people to talk about stuff that they love. And I think that when you have that passion, I mean, yeah, people are going to lean in.
Totally. I mean, you can feel that in somebody, and I also think it's a way to, I originally started that, and also I love saying because I was like, how do we teach people to present? And like, I don't want to have to like make it like a like really boring thing. So just talk about something that you love. Just get up in front of people and talk about something you love. You don't have to research anything. You like you know all this stuff. But what became obvious was that like when somebody gets fired up about something, and I think the same is true of ideas, right? It's really endearing, and you really like there's a vulnerability to it, like to say I really love whatever it is, Magic the Gathering, and you're like oh boy, and then you start to hear why they love it, and you're like oh that sounds cool, and also I know like how you work, like how your brain works, like there's just something to that that is it's infectious, and I think that the more you can do that, and also like I said earlier, I was starting to say like there was this quote, and I wish I could remember where it came from, but it was this music school, and they had this motto that was like, if you only know three chords, teach somebody who knows two. And it
Mm,
basically was like, you don't have to be an expert. I think that's the misconception a lot of times is that you have to be an expert to teach other people the thing. You don't. You just need to know a little bit more than they do, and vice versa, right? Like I learned tons of stuff from the students because they're all into all kinds of stuff that I don't know anything about, and so it's a two-way streak, and it's just a it's a lovely environment. It's really fulfilling to be in it.
yeah. Jim, I want to start wrapping things up just a little bit. And anything that you want to talk about in terms of Domestika, UT Austin, students, anything that we haven't touched on yet that you want to make sure any advice that you'd give our listeners?
Uh, I've been thinking about this idea recently about I wrote down learn to surf as, and I'm not a surfer. I don't know how to surf. But like in a metaphorical sense, because I think one of the things that students, all of us probably to some degree, is we think, cool, I've learned everything I need to learn, and now I'm good. Like I'm set. And a lot of us we've seen, okay, here comes AI. Like, are you still good? And it's like, oh crap, like now I gotta like rethink everything. And I think if you can, rather than thinking about like, how do I like just bolster myself with just this knowledge of this specific stuff, but a little bit more like philosophical approach around whatever comes along, I want to have the tools to be able to surf those waves, and that wave could be AI, it could be NFTs, it could be Photoshop a long time ago came around and people were like, oh gosh, here goes but like, and you can go back all the way through history to like the printing press. Like people were terrified about the change the printing press was going to make. It was going to like spread all this terrible information. It's the same stuff over and over. And if you can like figure out like, how do I like, what are the things that I need to equip myself with to surf those waves and stay on top
Mm,
of them, anticipate them, and not be like, I'm just going to stand here in this one place and I'm going to be fine because I learned the thing that I need to learn and I'm good for life. um, I've been thinking about that a lot lately, mostly with the AI stuff and like, what do we need to teach students? But there's going to be something that comes after AI. 15 years down the road, who knows? There's going to be another thing, and so like, how do you prepare yourself mentally and emotionally, and I don't know, whatever other way to like handle whatever else comes along, down the road.
yeah. I think I got into advertising because I loved the Nike Bow Nose campaign. It was just one of my favorite campaigns of all time. And I wanted to do TV spots, like that. And I haven't done a Bow Nose campaign, but I've done a ton of TV spots in my career. And I wouldn't be surprised if I've already done my last national primetime TV commercial, but I'm still going to be doing content. I'm still going to be doing videos. I'm still going to be doing stuff that tons and tons of people see, but I'm not locked into, I want to do the kind of ad you see between uh, Family Ties and Cheers on Thursday night. And I don't know that I'd want to necessarily do that. I'd want to do something that has more legs. I'd want to do something that's more experimental.
The last thing like you had a lot of broadcasts and $1 million budgets here and there. The last thing I filmed, I it was with some sports guys, some professional sports NFL players, and it was me, the rep, the agent from the player, and the guy with the camera, just running around shooting stuff, and I was like holding the balance and stuff like that. And, and I'm like, but part of that, I was like really felt very connected to that. I'm like, this is cool. Like, we're just running around with a camera. Like, that's kind of how I started, getting interested in this kind of stuff. Was like, oh, we got a VHS camera. My parents bought a VHS camera, and I'm running around like shooting stuff. And it's like, this is fun. It's the same thing, it's the same kind of thinking. It's just totally different, environment for it.
Yeah. I was just listening to the interview on the Smartless podcast with James Gunn, and they were kind of saying the same thing. Like James Gunn just used to run around, you know, with a VHS camera shooting stuff, and that's before Guardians of the Galaxy and Superman and all that. And now he's the chairman of the DCU, but he still makes time to run around and shoot stuff because that's the fun stuff. Like you don't have to have the ultra high level production, although there are some perks and there are some reasons to do it, but that's not the execution isn't necessarily the reason you're doing it. Just making the stuff. Again, it goes back to being not just creatives, but creators.
100%. That's
So
why we got into it, right?
yeah, yeah. So Jim, as always, I close with my travel questions, and I always, you were the first one that I asked this to. I don't know if you still remember, but I always ask, if you're in the airport, you can go anywhere you want. Where are you going to go and why? And you get a domestic location, you get an international. I looked it up. Do you remember what your original domestic and international uh, picks were first time we talked?
I Vietnam, and was it New
Yep.
Orleans?
No, but I mean, this is, you're on again, so you can choose. You picked either Key West or Maine. You're somewhere on either pole of the East Coast. You want to stick with those? You
Alright,
want to
I
modify?
will keep either of I'm gonna modify because I got a trip coming up, so I can check this one off. I'm gonna go backpacking in Big Bend in November. So Big Bend is my answer.
Oh man, you're going to love it. You're going to see stars like you have not seen before in your life. I took my family hiking in Big Bend, and
I can't wait.
we heard a cougar mountain lion scream. We're like, was that a cougar mountain lion scream? Like, yeah, somewhere. Yeah, you're gonna love that. Big Bend is, I think it like that, and maybe Isle Royale in Michigan are like the two least visited national parks in the whole system. It's because they're just so freaking hard to get to. But you are gonna. When I was at Big Bend, I just took my regular iPhone out, snapped the sky, and you just get stars. Like you don't have to do any filtering. It's that amazing. That's great. So
Oh, I can't wait. I
you
can't
still gonna
wait.
go to
I can't wait.
Vietnam? Is Vietnam still your international pick?
That's still my international thing, and no, I don't have any plans to go there, but I would love to go there someday.
Yeah. Well, Jim Basilvac, thank you so much for joining. Always great to have you on. And well, I'll make sure that we get the Domestika site up so people can look at it. That'll be in the show notes. So look at go on Domestika. And what's the name of the class again?
Developing creative advertising campaigns from brief to pitch.
Learn how to do that with Jim Basilvac on Domestika. Thanks again, Jim. It's been great.
Thanks, Greg.